Theology of the body destroys what's left of the edifice of marriage in France, which wasn't much. However, there's a new court case that just came out. Someone sued for divorce based on lack of marital debt. Someone was not paying the marital debt, and the court in France agreed, but then the other party appealed to the European Convention for Human Rights, and they said, no, that's old-fashioned stuff, no more marital debt. So now the new precedent in all of Europe is marriage has nothing to do with rights regarding the conjugal act. I'm sure the bishops will be happy because that fits their new model of marriage perfectly, a.k.a. love wins. But everyone's walking around saying, why? If there wasn't much reason to get married, and now there's absolutely zero reason. So we're going to get into that and the definition of all this stuff and what the solution is. I'm John Farrell, coming to you from the mean streets of Bellevue. This is Annulment Proof, the only place on YouTube where marriage gets defined.
Happily, where love is key, where boy meets girl, here's what they sing. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the moon seems to glow like you've had too much blow, that's amore.
Is that fun? I don't think so. Hey, listen, let me turn these guys down a little bit. The hickoids from Texas, we had to put them on. I'm from Texas. It brought me back. But listen, you thought that was bad. Wait till you see the little French girl at the end of this movie, at the end of this video. She's a poster girl for why we have to have law back in marriage instead of feelings. But you'll see at the end. Anyway, let's go to this article, shall we? Hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. All right, so I'll put me in here just a small bit. This is 8 days old, I think, and it says these marital duties. What are they? They're a mystery now, and this court overruled, like I said, one spouse who said this is the cause for divorce. So we're going to go through this article and kind of talk about what it means, what marital debt is, and what this means for marriage, okay? We'll see what I come up with. Anyway, so Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, that's the new, like, kind of United Nations kind of gig that they've come up with, that says everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life. This is sort of like the American right to privacy that gave us abortion. So the respect for the private life, okay? So they use that to say that marriage no longer has the marital debt. So in 2015, okay, let me see. Okay, so yes, she said, listen, I want to file divorce because my husband has been bad-tempered, insulting. Okay, so he's acting up. So, why that happened, maybe we could figure that out. Could it have something to do with that she failed to fulfill her marital duties? That's what he said. He counterclaimed, okay? So then the court agreed in Versailles, serious and repeated breach of marital duties and obligations, making it impossible to continue in a state of matrimony. Okay, so this is entirely Catholic. All this law, all this stuff comes from the Catholic Church. All the marriage contract, that's all it is, okay? It's like common sense. But if you cut yourself off from the church, then you slowly run on fumes, and now we have nothing left. So she appealed the case within France, but was rejected. Okay, so she took it to the Human Rights Court. On Thursday, the judges found that the very existence of such a marital obligation ran counter to sexual freedom. Okay, sounds familiar. This is all Vatican II applied because the marriage contract is the right over the body for acts suitable for the generation of children. However, in Vatican II, they said it's also oriented toward good of the spouses, which means that you have a right to partnership, equal partnership, okay? So you have two competing forces. You've got the marital debt, and then you've got, what do you call it? Partnership. So those two are working in opposition. There are times when it's perfectly fine. They're both the same, but there are times when, no, I want partnership, but I want marital debt. So you have the internal conflict. So now, obviously, they're saying what everyone else has already been saying. Love wins, which is effectively how the way NFP works too. Procreation loses. In the court's view, consent to marriage could not imply consent to future sexual relations. That's very important. So the court is saying when you consent to marriage, you're not consent. There is no marital debt. Marriage is a great big nothing at this point. You're going to play house and hope for the best. That's all marriage is, really? No, it's always been known as the right over the body for acts suitable for generation of children. That's obviously what it is. So that's what the consent is. But if you were to ask Christopher West and all the other TOB people, they'll say consent is not for the right over the body, but it's to love, okay? So you don't get any rights, you just get love. So the theology of the body is marriage destruction from under the guise of Catholicism. That's what it is. And that's what this is. So the object of consent is no longer the body, but it's partnership. Therefore, consent is to how I feel. Okay. And it could not imply consent to future relations. Okay. So there's no contract, in other words. And that's what everyone's saying. No, it's a covenant, baby, blah, blah. Oh, yeah? Okay, so there's nothing there. Such an interpretation would be tantamount to denying that marital rape was reprehensible in nature. Such an interpretation would be tantamount to deny. Okay, yes, marital rape is reprehensible in nature, but it doesn't exist. As we can see from my background here, this is St. Thomas Aquinas, okay? Yep. He says, although the husband sins by using violence, he is not guilty of the crime of rape. Why does he say that? Because of what you consent to in marriage. You consent to the right over the body, the perpetual and exclusive right over the body. That's what you consent to. So if she consents to that, consent eliminates rape, okay? He could be all sorts of violent and all sorts of sinful and really bad and really uncharitable and not cool, but it's not rape because there's consent. But they are saying no. Consent could not imply consent to future sexual relations. Therefore, what you always thought marriage was no longer, okay? And this has already been happening in the U.S. since 1970 with no-fault divorce. Because there's no fault. There's no contract. There ain't no nothing. Therefore, marriage is dead. Okay, there is a solution, which I'll get to. Hopefully, I won't forget. Okay, also noted. Here, let's go back to this. Let me get me really small. Also noted was the concept marital duties took. Hang on, the concept of marital duties took no account whatsoever to consent to sexual relations. Also noted that the concept of marital duties took no account whatsoever to consent of what? I don't even get what they're talking about. Anyway, people have used the analogy that I guess the husband can just decide he doesn't want to work, and that's it. So you know what I mean? It's like if the shoe were on the other foot. Marriage without a contract is dead on arrival, and that's what we have today, which is why people are leaving it in droves. There's no reason to get involved other than moral reasons, but from a logical or legal standpoint, it's stupid. You're just exposing yourself to downside, and that's what happens a lot. Someone made a really good quote on another video. He said, marriage and divorce go hand in hand. That is exactly right. And again, if you watch this little French girl at the end of the video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, man. Okay, so there it is. They find themselves confronted with aberrant and unjust decisions, calling into question their bodily integrity and their right to privacy. Woo. Okay, P.S. Marriage is public. It's a public contract. Let's see. I just did the yellow highlights because this is the part they got wrong. Women's rights groups in France hailed the ruling, respect for human dignity must prevail over all archaic interpretations by French judges. Where did these archaic interpretations come from? What they're saying is the definition of marriage. This isn't a view or an interpretation. The definition of marriage is a rights contract. That's what it is. But they're saying this. Obviously, feminist groups don't want this because they want all the upside, but they don't want to have kids. The Bible says you shall be saved through childbearing, and they're like, nah, not so much. So this is the feminist goal, is to destroy marriage, and this is how you do it. Kind of like if you wanted to destroy car ownership, you get rid of all rights to own the car so people can just get in your car and take off when they want. And eventually everyone's going to like, forget this, I'm not owning a car. So car dealerships go out of business. There's no roads. There's no nothing. It's all that's happening with marriage. Now you have no kids. You got a bunch of, just like, you got a bunch of like wild dogs and wild cats. Well, you're going to have a bunch of wild kids with no parents. Sound familiar? It's the women's attorney, blah, blah. Okay. This is a major development for women's right to control their bodies. It's the same fruit as abortion. It's this, including with the framework of marriage. Okay. Yeah. That's all it is. That's why they like it. This is all feminist stuff. Theology of the body is feminist garbage. Okay. And they dress it up with all sorts of PR, but that's all it is. It's a destruction of the contract for feminism. And this is all France is doing. You could ask Christopher West, what does he think about this French decision? He'll say, I think it's really important that we respect the freedom of the gift, as he says. So yes, he's super down on marital debt. He can't even talk about what it is. He says it's the right over the body person. Whatever, dude. Okay. The Washington Post is marriage is no longer sexual servitude. It was never such. What does the man have to do? Employment servitude? No, it's part of the package. He works. She has kids. If you don't want to do that, don't sign up. Don't get married. But don't pretend marriage is whatever you feel like, and there's no contract. Okay, so we don't have to go over what marital debt is. That's what it is. It's just the right over the body. And yes, it's not an absolute right, but there is no contrary right until you bring in Theology of the Body and Vatican II. Now there's two orientations to marriage, no longer one. So they are competing. Okay, so it's not written in French law that you must have sexual relations when you are married. That's right. It is not written in French law or any law that you have to use your marital rights. However, you do have them, and they can be asserted, okay? So this is just a play on words that they're catching you unawares. You don't have to use your rights, but you do have those rights. Unless marriage has no rights, then there's nothing to consent to. And again, all you're doing is saying, let's agree to play house and see how it works. That's all. Now, with this decision, they can't say that anymore. Okay. So they're saying that let me just read this again. It is not written in French law that you must have sexual relations when you are married. But the judges in France are saying this. Okay, the judges in France are saying you have a right. But now that they took it upstairs to the European Convention of Human Rights Court, now they're not going to be able to say that anymore. So they didn't say it right, but they've essentially just taken the marital debt contract, which comes from 1 Corinthians 7:4, right over the body. That's all it is. It's divine law. And they got rid of it. I'm going to change the background to something more thematic. This is the background I was talking about. I couldn't fit it on my background, so we're just going to show it as the picture. So here is the wife, the new wife, NFP, Theology of the Body, and Annulment as needed. And he's like 12 kids till death do us part. So he's got the old definition of marriage, and she's got the new definition of marriage, pre-Cana set up for failure. This is exactly what the problem is. You've got two different orientations, okay? You have objective procreation and you have subjective partnership, and they're eventually going to part ways. That's why divorce goes hand in hand with marriage, and this is why marriage is dead, because they're not on the same page, because the page is open to interpretation, okay? And as I said at the end of the video, we will hear from the little French girl who shows you why hell hath no fury. Okay, here, let's go back to our article. and see where we were. So that was kind of the end of the article. But then they go the notes from the court case. So we're gonna go through that a little bit, see what we can talk about. According to the long-standing but consistent case law, spouses are bound by a conjugal duty, that is, an obligation to maintain sexual relations to fulfill that which may failure to fulfill which may justify divorce. Long-standing but consistent case law, as in the Catholic Church. This is where all marriages came from. All separation courts were Catholic till Martin Luther, and he gave them to the state, okay? And the Catholics had the separation courts up until the late 60s. Every diocese, your diocese, you had to get separated by the bishop before you could go to the state. That's Catholic. Right now, we're all Lutherans on this, and the state handles it. But the state doesn't know how to handle marriage, so they eventually let it all go. Now, there ain't nothing there to stop. So there's fault-based divorce, but there's no contract, so you can kind of find fault. It's no fault at this point. But yeah, that's a question you could ask your bishop, ask your tribunal, what is the best type of civil divorce process? Fault-based or no fault? And they will have to say no fault because their contract doesn't exist, because it's a love wins, NFP, no rights type thing. Okay, here we go. Since 1984, the Court of Cassation, whatever that means, causation, has acknowledged the reprehensible nature of rape between spouses. Okay, has rape between spouses only been reprehensible in 1984, or what about in 1974 or 1874? This is because there's never been any such thing as rape between spouses. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in nature because spouses have consent. See what I'm saying? You know what I mean? So I think it's 1993. Throughout the United States, there was such a crime as marital rape. It didn't exist. This is because everybody knew that marriage was the marital debt. So with consent, it's consent to perpetual and exclusive right. But now with Theology of the Body and NFP, our new natural purpose is no longer procreation, but it is flesh. Basically, it's love. So that means I need to have partnership. Therefore, there ain't no consent to anything. There's just, we're going to play house and you're going to consent. We're all going to consent every time. This is why marriage is now meaningless, and the statistics bear it out. I shouldn't say meaningless, definitionless. That's another thing they always talk about. Is like, we need to focus on the meaning of marriage. I don't care what the meaning of marriage is. You can talk about it all you want. The symbolism, the significance, that's all cool and everything. But where the rubber meets, like the significance of my mortgage. What is the meaning of that mortgage payment? As long as you put the money in the mail, we don't really care. That's the point, okay? You have to define your terms. The applicant maintains, that's the person filing for divorce, the existence of marital duty. This is the guy, okay? And granting the divorce on the grounds that she was exclusively at fault. Yes, as I've always said, there's only one person at fault in a divorce, or there's no reason for it. P.S. There's no reason for any divorce in the USA, only separation. That's what divorce is. So Old Testament, y'all. Okay, we're like, don't go back there. We can't go back. We need to stay with what we got. Permanent marriage. There can be a place for separation after it's adjudicated by the local ordinary, but there is no divorce. There's never a need for it, ever. You can separate. You can get legal separation or equivalent in all 50 states. That's it. The person you marry is... Our culture is so goofed up. I hope somebody in the government can address this. They're addressing everything else, but if we don't have marriage, we're like hosed. People know that, but someone's got to define it. You can't. The government can never get this right. It's got to be the church defining it. This is why you have to have religious freedom rights, and you got to define your own marriage contract. Okay. Just like with Obergefell, they say marriage is a right, so they can marry who or whatever they want, kind of thing. So Catholics have to be able to define their own marriage contract too. This is kind of the solution to MGTOW and all. You've got to define that contract yourself. You've got to do it yourself marriage, basically, DIY. Learn what it is, educate yourself, and execute, okay? And then find out with your new potential spouse, do we both agree on the contract? Do we know what the terms are? And what are the consequences for violating these terms? It's damnation. No sacraments. That's it. This is how you can get married today. The bishop is not on your side. Christopher West is not on your side, even though he might be smiling. And the state sure as heck isn't. Okay? And in a way, it's worse when the bishop isn't on your side, because you kind of count on them and they're like, hey, there's no contract. All's fair in love and war. It's really lame. Okay. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. The applicant maintains by reaffirming the existence of marital duty and granting the divorce on the grounds that she has, I already said that, had refused to have relations with her husband. The domestic courts disregarded her right to respect for private life. That's the same thing as abortion. So she took this to the European Convention of Human Rights. But she goes, I need my right to private life. Respect my private life. No, because marriage is public. And you made a public vow. It's public rights. I could think of some analogy, I guess. But, it's like if someone has a right to something. You can't say, well, my private life says I have a right to your something. No, This is the same thing as the right to abortion. It's the right to privacy. That's what we need. Okay? So this law will eventually go away too, because it makes no sense. She also claims that the Court of Cassation has abandoned the concept of marital duty since a judgment of September 5th, 1990. Okay, so she's saying, look, this isn't the Catholic Church we're talking about. This is fallible men with they're hanging on to the torn rags of marriage, which was given to them by the Catholic Church. And then after a few centuries of Protestantism, there ain't nothing left. Now you add contraception to the mix and NFP from the Catholics. There's no basis in law anymore for the marital debt, because we have marital love instead. That's the new orientation. So is this a 1790, 1890? No. In 1990, the court said they've abandoned the concept of marital duty, because that's harsh and cruel, and that shows rights, okay? Not doing that anymore. So, but my point is that this is all modernist, feminist trashola to destroy marriage. That's why this is why else is new, okay? She maintains that the solution adopted in the present case, this is cool. She maintains that the solution adopted in the present case, when she lost her divorce thing, the man initially prevailed, revives an archaic view of marriage. Wow. Do we already talk about this? Yeah, this archaic view of marriage. It's the Catholic view. But you know something? Again, ask your bishop, does he think this is an archaic view of marriage? They'll say stuff like, when we used to do the hierarchy of ends, that wasn't really helpful. And that didn't focus on the true meaning of mutual love and everything. Now we got all these symbols and meanings and signs and stuff like that, and spirits and whatever the heck there's other words that they use. Dimensions. Oh, the love dimension. Whatever. Okay. Thirdly, she contests the necessity of this interference, referring to judgment, blah, blah, blah. She maintains that rape between spouses cannot go unpunished. There she goes again. So she's saying, he's saying marital debt, and that's not consent, therefore it's rape. No. Repeat after me. Repeat after St. Thomas Aquinas. What does he say? Here, look. Although the husband sins by using violence, he is not guilty of the crime of rape. That's because you consent to a lifetime of rights, and rape requires no consent. So it's impossible to commit rape in marriage. Completely impossible. You can do bad stuff, but you can't rape. It's not possible. unless you change the definition, the object of marriage. There's no more rights. Then you can rape your spouse if there's no right to the conjugal act, which there isn't anymore after theology of the body, okay? So the theology of the body business is feminist legal takeover of Catholic marriage. And you know something? All the queers love it too. It's all love wins. It's so funny. I watched a little video, maybe I'll look for it in a second, where people were talking about this court case, and you just got homos out front with their little love win signs, okay? It's all the same flavor. Man. Hold on, let me get me. Okay. Now, where else are we? The government. He maintains, this is the husband, I guess, however, that the interference was provided for by law. He states that under Article 125, spouses undertake a mutual obligation to a community of life. Oh, wait, this is the government. The spokesman for the government, not the husband. Spouses undertake a mutual obligation to a community of life. Where have I heard that before? That's the new code of canon law. This mutual obligation would also be a mutual right. P.S. You could say that marriage is dead today because there's no rights, only obligations, okay? So if you have an obligation to a community of life, that means you have a right to a community of life, and that has no legal definition. So therefore, I have a right to be happy, and therefore you have to make me happy. Okay, this is why people say in divorce law, you do have a right to be happy. No, you don't. There's the right till death for the marital debt. That's it. You can be happy or sad. It's an inside job, but you don't have the right to be happy. But this is saying, yes, you do. A community of life. That means like everything's got to be groovy, and I get to decide what that is for me. Okay, so you have two people in conflict. Whenever you have more than one person in a room, there's going to be conflict. Duh. That's all. This is why it's a setup for failure. Failure, like I said, which is generally understood to imply a community of bed. Yeah. While he accepts that no provision in the civil code expressly obliges spouses to maintain intimate relations, he maintains that this obligation results from well-established case law. So I may have misread this. It's going back and forth, but he is saying this. He's basically saying, look, if we got this is, like I said, this is not Catholic. This is just a mishmash of French Viva la Revolution stuff. So they're saying, look, community of life means community of bed. Okay. So it's well-established case law that spouses, there's the obligation, so there's the right to the debt. He's going, okay. But so he also argues the marital duty is not subject to compulsory execution. He further submits to the criminal law punishment, guarantees their freedom to refuse any intimate relationship. Let me think about this and come back. I underlined this for a reason. I want to get this right. So hang on just a second. Okay, so I guess this is just the government saying that the court now guarantees the freedom to refuse any intimate relationship. Therefore, the right to marital debt has just been canceled. That's all. So, yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to force anything, but rights are rights, okay? If I have a right to get in my car, I don't have a right to get in your car. So I get to assert my right, but you can't force it. Thirdly, he argues that I don't know who the he is, but let's just keep going. Thirdly, he argues that the spouses freely consented to their marriage and deliberately submitted to the duties it entails. What are the rights and duties that marriage entails? Okay? Nobody knows. I gotta show you guys something. Okay, so check this out. This is why Vatican II has blown it all up and why France is doing what it's doing, because there's no one in the church anymore who is saying there's marital debt. So France is left holding the bag going, the Protestants don't do it, the Catholics don't do it. Why are we still doing this? Okay, look at what the commentary on canon law from 2000 says, all right? Okay, so I've gone through this before, but it's worth repeating. Canon 1151, spouses have the duty and the right to preserve conjugal living. That is exactly what this guy was talking about in France, okay? And unless there's a legitimate cause. And he's saying the legitimate cause is my wife is ignoring their marital debt. And although this code frames this duty as a right in the language of positive law, is rooted in the nature and of marriage as a partnership of the whole of life. So that is the new orientation. Therefore, no more rights. Okay, so now you have marriage unmoored from rights. What does that mean? It floats out into space, into nothing. Listen to this. Following the teaching of Vatican II, which is not teaching, it's just words that aren't binding, because Paul VI said so at the end of Vatican II. Jurisprudence gradually began. Okay, jurisprudence, that means men in robes started thinking, wow, we can expand the rights of marriage now. Woohoo! Gradually began to recognize, wow, we had no idea that nature was so expansive. We know so much more now. That the essential rights, that is the legal essence, which comes from nature, the essence of marriage, rights and obligations of marriage extend well beyond the perpetual and exclusive right over the body. Wow, who knew? So for 1,967 years or thereabouts, 65 years, marriage was a right over the body. But now we are recognizing that it's not. It's so much more in themselves for the procreate. Okay, so it's more than right over the body for acts. How much more? Marital obligations considered essential expanded. So you are taking the essence and expanding it. You're taking nature. You're saying what constitutes a zebra has been expanded now. That's what they're doing. Now, what are the rights and duties of marriage? We were right back here. We were saying, fourthly, he argues, spouses freely consented to their marriage and deliberately submitted to the duties it entails. Does anyone know what the duties of marriage are? The rights and duties of marriage? Raise your hand. Nobody can tell you what those are. Nobody. And that's because NFP says we need love-based marriage. Let's look at what the Code of Canon Law commentary says. What are the rights of marriage? It is impossible to make a complete listing of the rights because there's so many of them now. They don't exist. It's infinite because it's like having a property line rather than no property line. You go out and your property goes out into space. It's infinite. The human heart is not. You can't define it. You can't put a line on it. So my definition of partnership could be all sorts of stuff. So I can't predict it. All I can do is say we're going to consent to a whole bunch of consenting. And we don't know what we're going to consent to in the future or whether we are, but we're just going to play house and see how it goes. That's why they do all this marriage prep. How about a little 10-year marriage prep to really tweak our chemistry so we get it right? It's so stupid. The next video I'm going to make is called Gay Pre-Cana. That's going to be a fun one. Now, let's get rid of this. Let's go back and finish our court case. Blah, blah, blah. Fourthly, he argues that the spouse who is refused by his or her spouse can only be released from his or her duty or fidelity by divorce. I didn't quite understand that. Fourthly, he argues that the spouse who is refused by his... Okay, so if you don't do the marital debt, you can be released from that by divorce. That's just state stuff. Should we go over Matthew 19:9 again? That's where Jesus says, no divorce, but you can put away... Here, let me get me a little bit bigger. You can put away your spouse. Put away means separate. Put away. Okay? That you can do, but you can't divorce, but you can separate. If they're unfaithful, they commit adultery. Porneia, fornication, adultery. That's what that means. That's what it's always meant. Until the 70s. All your Bible translations, all your Catholic people saying the exception clause in Matthew 19:9 is for invalidity, for unlawful marriage. That is all new. Forever and a day, it's always been if they commit adultery, which is anything against marriage, you can separate, but there is no divorce. This is why divorce has always been a stigma. Until now, there ain't no contract. Divorce is nothing. You can't steal a car if it's not theirs. If everyone owns all cars because there's there's no car theft, okay? So there's nothing wrong with stealing a car like there used to be because nobody owns the cars, just like nobody owns the right to their spouse. There's no more rights. That should be obvious. Okay, let's go through. What else do we got? Here, let's go a little bit bigger. It further recalls that respect for personal autonomy is an important principle underlying the interpretation of the guarantees of Article 8. Article 8 is the European Convention of Human Rights when they said you get the right to freedom, this is, like I said, it's what constitutes the undermining of Christian marriage contract. The Protestants call it a covenant first because they have no bishops to adjudicate. And now the Catholics are following along because they have to put their NFP somewhere, and that requires a love-based contract which can't exist, so they call it a covenant. No rights. No rights, no problems. The right to respect the private life must therefore be understood as guaranteeing sexual freedom. Wow, the love wins people are going to take off on that one because it's all about your private life, you know? Right to privacy, that's all it is. It's all, like I said, it's all from the same tree. Let's scroll through all this legalese stuff. I already kind of, here. Which provide that a divorce may be granted on the grounds of fault where acts constituting a serious or repeated breach of the duties and obligations of marriage are attributable to one of the spouses and make the continuation of common life intolerable. So that's old style. That's Can 1153. That's exactly what it says. If this is all this is. So this marriage and fault based and all that is just Catholic, and there's still fumes of it in Europe. It died in 1970 with no fault divorce in the USA. It's just garbage. But they still had a little bit of it in Europe. That's why there's no massive amounts of divorce over there. But that's going to change. The parties' disagreement concerns only the extent of the duties and obligations of marriage. Yes. Look at Canon Law 11 or Canon Law 1095, the loose canon that all the annulments are granted on, okay? It says if you are not capable of the essential, if you're not capable of essential rights and duties. So what are those essential rights? The parties' disagreement concerns the extent of the duties and obligations of marriage. As you can see from Vatican II, they've changed the essence, dude. Therefore, we're all in disagreement on what the essence of marriage are, the rights and obligations. Therefore, like when I showed you this picture, okay, these guys disagree on what the rights and duties are. She's like, right to partnership, and he's like, right to over the body for acts. You got a conflict. She's like, I got my rights, and he's like, I got my rights. So you have two different marriages set up, two different contracts. They go, oh, everyone needs to harmonize. What that means is, you do what the wife says. The wife is now in charge. That's it. That's what it means. Because she's got her feelings and her partnership, and this is why the feminists are all about divorce, because they, not that men don't divorce, but they're the ones who want to control the kids and want to control the money and all that. I'm not saying that exactly right, but it's the divorce is all about feminism in the numbers. Let's go back to this. All right, let me make it a little bit bigger. The applicant's main, and more particularly the persistence of the conjugal duty. Yeah, so that's old news right there. The applicant's main argument, this is the wife, that domestic law does not require the spouses to have sexual relations. Wait, I'm not catching on to this. The applicant's main argument is that domestic law does not require spouses to have sexual. Yes, that's right. You don't have to exercise your rights, but you do have the rights. So they're just being difficult with how they're putting it. The court notes, however, that it follows from long-standing, aka Catholic, but consistent case law of the Court of Cassation that spouses are bound by a marital duty and that failure to fulfill it may constitute a fault justifying divorce, aka for Catholics it's separation. So yes, that's Matthew 19:9. This is all old-fashioned stuff that we've forgotten about, and Vatican II has just crushed it all. What did it just say? Okay, so right now, if you go to Canon Law 221, I think it is, it'll say if someone is not fulfilling the rights that you have, if you are being violated of your rights, you can take that to ecclesiastical court. That is exactly what this is, which is why we had separation courts. Okay? You have a right to the conjugal act, and if failure to fulfill it may constitute a fault. It does, of justifying divorce, meaning separation court. This is just natural stuff. It's what marriage is. But nowadays, if two guys can get married, then marriage is love, and all this is like super out the window. And the Catholic Church is fine, but it's the Catholics in the church that are fanning the flames of all this theology of the body to the max. They keep throwing more TOB, more gasoline on the fire. That's all this is. They're burning the whole thing down by eliminating the structure of marriage, the edifice, the law which holds it up into lawlessness till there's nothing left. It's so weird. And by the way, you can't talk to any of these theology of the body people. Once you point any of this out, they're like, this conversation is over. That's kind of how it goes. Okay. That'd be really fun to get one of those theology of the body people on this show. On this channel to talk. I don't know if I could find one. I mean, I'm blocked everywhere. The judgment of September 5th, 1990, to which the applicant refers, was not given in divorce matters, but in criminal matters. It merely recalled that the reprehensible nature of marital rape, which doesn't exist, despite this convenient case law, the Court of Cassation confirmed that prolonged abstention from intimate relations attributed to the wife was to justify the granting of a divorce on the grounds of fault, provided it was not justified by sufficient medical reasons. Okay, so that's just more old school stuff. In the alternative, the applicant, I think that's the wife, that the exact scope of the marital duty was unforeseeable. It's called for better or for worse. Okay, that's like if you buy an airplane ticket to Chicago, you're getting in that plane, and you can't say, I didn't know we were going really, really, truly to Chicago. I didn't know the extent and scope of our trip. No, it is what it is. You got to say what it is. It's perpetual and exclusive right over the body for acts. That's just what it is. So she didn't know what the exact. It's too bad. You don't get married if you don't want the terms of the contract. You've got to do this yourself. I'm telling everyone who wants to get married today, you have got to identify the terms yourself. You can't ask your priest, you can't ask your canon lawyer, and you can't ask your bishop, what are the rights and duties of marriage? Because they cannot answer you, because they're all in the twilight zone of NFP law, which is lawless marriage. Nothing there. Can't talk about it. We just need to perfect our chemistry, our love language, and all that fun stuff. How's your communication? All right. Now, okay, let's keep going. Is that it? Or we're almost done. Let's go. Almost done. Check it out. Then we get to listen to the nice French girl at the end, who's gonna kick everyone's booty. Which is, you can't let her near the controls, man. That's what the problem is. The applicant is seeking, this is the wife, seeking a symbolic euro for non-pecuniary damage she considers she has suffered as a result of shameful nature of the divorce being pronounced exclusively at her fault. Oh, no. Yes. As I said before, every separation has some person 100% at fault and the other person 100% innocent. Otherwise, there's no reason for a separation. If you have somebody who's 60% at fault and somebody who's 40% at fault or something like that, whoever separates is the guilty party until proven innocent, because you cannot divorce because you promised for life, okay? You cannot separate because you promised for life. So, and if there is no reason for separation, you can't separate or you're guilty. But if there is reason for separation, then the person causing the reason is the guilty party. If a car gets stolen, there's one guilty party and one innocent party. Oh no, but they left their car open. It's like, yeah, no, but they didn't. You're the one who stole it, so you're guilty of it. It's not. We don't know who's guilty here. Whoever stole the car is the guilty party. Whoever filed for divorce is the guilty party. So it's exclusive. You can't get away from that logically. Stating that she was particularly hurt by the sanction, thus pronounced her on a matter of affecting her sexual life. That's a drag, but the contract is the contract. P.S. Everyone has a right to their good name. Okay, so this is why the church is so good on this. I think it's going to be like canon law 219 or 224 or something like that. You have a right to your good name. So this is if people are saying, I divorced you because you're an abuser or something, you can take that to court and have it judged because you have a right to your good name. And so if everyone says you're the guilty spouse, you can have a case done. I might think about doing that. That just occurred to me. Okay. Anyway, there's our old friend St. Thomas Aquinas. Oh, and I think we got one other. We got a little bit of juicy Humanae Vitae here, and then we're done. This is Humanae Vitae 13, and this is where this rot comes from. Let's make it a little bit bigger, okay? Men rightly observe that the conjugal act imposed on one's partner without regard to his or her condition or personal and reasonable wishes in the matter is no true act of love. So let's Humanae Vitae is packed with like weasel words designed to affect your attitude and your mood. Okay, so let's just strip this down a little bit. A conjugal act imposed, that means that's not mutual, meaning that one person wants it's okay, it's just not mutual, but that's okay because you consented to that your whole life without regard to his or her condition or personal and reasonable wishes. So they really load up the words, but basically it's if you want the marital debt but the other person has a personal wish against it, then that's not a true act of love. But true act, so number one, we're talking about you have a right to the act, but the other person is saying, but they're saying if you disregard their personal wishes, so you don't really have the right unless their personal wishes say it's okay. So your thought you had the right to the marital debt, but you really don't after Vatican II, in theory. So none of this is binding. This is Humanae Vitae. None of this is binding because it's not infallible. It's just stuff that they say, and everyone goes with it. Okay? You cannot violate divine law, which is marital debt, but that's kind of what this is. Listen, they say, so it's no true act of love. What is an act of love? What's the difference between that and a true act of love? What is the legal definition of true act of love? It's not in the law. This is all feelings and sentiment, and therefore offends the moral order. Okay, so if you bring up marital debt and your spouse says, I have personal wishes in opposition to that, then to pursue the conjugal act offends the moral order in its particular application. Okay, if you're offending the moral order that one time, if they further reflect, they must also recognize that an act of mutual love, it's not an act of mutual love legally, it's a conjugal act. But like I said, they have two different orientations now. So they're calling it an act of mutual love, which impairs the capacity to transmit life, frustrated design. Okay. So, frustrated design, which constitute the norm of marriage. Listen, so they're saying they're blending in some NFP stuff here. If like I said, when you read this, you got to really parse it, because these guys are serious wordsmiths that threaded the needle on. There's a new natural purpose that we pulled out of thin air in 1967. If they further reflect, they must also recognize that an act of mutual love which impairs the capacity to transmit life, which God, the specific love, has built in, frustrates his design, which constitutes the norm of marriage. That's another way of saying the personalist norm. So it's not a conjugal act where you're cutting off procreation. It's a mutual love act, which you're cutting off the norm, okay? That means, that's why they say all this, you can't separate the procreative meaning from the unitive meaning and the symbolism and the essence. So stupid. But everyone is bamboozled by it, which contradicts the will. Listen to all this flowery language. The will of the author of life. Look, you're saying it's not God's will to impose a conjugal act against the personal wishes of the other. And then hence to use this divine gift, aka to use your marital rights while depriving it of its meaning and purpose. Okay, so they are saying now that legally you have to maintain its meaning. How do you do that? What are they saying? Because purpose is nature, purpose is law, purpose is procreation, but also you have to uphold its meaning. That's another way of saying there you cannot have, because because the conjugal act is no longer just a conjugal act. It is a true act of love, okay? It is a act of mutual love. That's all it is. So you have to have mutual love, truly mutual love, or it's not, you've missed the meaning. And if you have an act of love without enough truths for it first, just like a love with like a couple true loves, not like 18 true loves, you've missed the meaning. And this is equally repugnant to nature. Okay? So you have to have this love thing or it's not natural, which is a bunch of garbage, which leads to all other crazy stuff like the divinization of marriage. And we all have infinite dignity and stuff because now nature is love, dude. And it's really weird. Okay? So repugnant to the nature of man and woman, and is consequently in opposition to the plan of God and his holy will. In other words, it's not God, you're opposing God's will, which means you cannot do the conjugal act minus the meaning. Meaning that, in other words, your marital debt is history, bro. That's all they're saying, man. They're like, it's gone. No marital debt, no contract. Everything's got to be mutual consent all the time. Therefore, you better learn how to simp really hard, okay? So what happens when you do that? Typically, you get the downward spiral because it's not in her nature for you to be a wimp, and it's not in your nature to do that either. So you get resentful, and she gets weird, and you get all sorts of problems. I'll give you a little demo right now. I know you've been waiting for it. Anyway, I'll take a like or two because I need all the help I can get. And don't forget to give me a hard time in the comment section. I know you do that. Till next time, we're going to have fun with the next video. Peace out.
Tous les bateaux portent ton drapeau. Je ne sais plus où aller. Tu es partout. Je suis malade, complètement malade. Je verse mon sang dans ton cœur et je suis comme un oiseau mort. Quand tout est dedans, je suis malade, parfaitement malade. Tu m'as privé de tous mes chants, tu m'as vidé de tous mes mots. Pourtant, je crois que j'avais du talent. dans ta peau. Cet amour me tue. Si ça continue, je crèverai seule, avec moi, près de ma radio, comme un gosse idiot, en écoutant ma propre voix, qui chantera. Je suis malade, complètement malade, comme quand ma mère sortait le soir et qu'elle me laissait seule avec mon deuil.